Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome at the CVC panel. It's great pleasure to have fantastic panelists here with me. So could you please introduce yourselves to the audience? Joey, why don't you start?
Sure, happy to do that. Thanks, Marcin. I'm really pleased to be able to participate in this great event. So, Joey Fish, I'm within group strategy in Deutsche Telekom. And we are, as group strategy, we are the corporate strategy function for the group, advising both the CEO and different board members on where we need to go as a company, new technologies, new areas of business. As part of this role, also, I'm one of the 2 co-managing directors of a small strategic investment fund called the Technology Innovation Pool, where we make very targeted strategic investments whose role is to really open up new ways of thinking and act as a kind of lever for change within Deutsche Telekom. But personal history is I worked actually with Marcin at Intel for many years. Was at Intel Capital at one point, based in Israel, but I've relocated and live in Bonn, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Joey. Jakub?
Hi, my name is Jakub Przybylski, and I work in ABB, Electrification Business Area, responsible for strategy and business development, and also EL Ventures, the newly created out of former larger group level ABB Technology Ventures. Now we have also exclusive venture arm specific for our electrification business area, which is half of the business of ABB currently.
Thank you, Jakub. Christoph.
Hi, I'm Christoph, principal of Lead Ventures. Lead Ventures is a fairly new VC focusing on the Central Eastern European scale-ups, and one of our major LP is MOL Group, the local energy champion.
Thank you, Christoph, and very brief introduction of myself. I'm Marcin Hejka. I'm general partner of OTB Ventures. OTB Ventures is a deep technology fund supporting technology companies with links to Central Eastern European talent. And in my previous life, I spent 18 years at Intel Capital, working with Joey, and initially being responsible for Central Eastern European region. With my role growing over time to managing also Middle East and Africa, Asia Pacific, except China, as well as Western Europe and Israel. So I know, after spending 18 years in CVC, I guess I know a lot about CVC, and being outside of it, I'm not going to hesitate to ask difficult questions to our panelists. And I would like to start with very brief kind of overview of where corporate venturing is versus traditional venturing. So I briefly looked at these statistics, and it seems that last year in 2020, corporate VCs, and there are approximately 1,000 of them. So it's actually a very sizable group of corporations decided to establish venture units. So 1,000 active corporate VCs supported deals worth $73 billion last year. So I'm talking not about 73 billion coming from CVCs, but actually CVCs being participants of rounds of this level, which means that every fourth venture deal globally last year had a participant from corporate venturing of one of the corporations. So overall, around 3,500 of startups got funded by CVCs last year, and this number is only increasing. So if we compare kind of the data for the last 5 years, we see that 5 years ago CVCs participated in roughly 20% of transactions in the market. It was already 25% last year. In terms of volume, actually the growth is even more dramatic, because the volume of CVC backed rounds increased 25% just in 2020. So basically, when we are talking about CVCs, we are not talking about anything exotic or anything minor. It's one of the largest parts of the venture capital market, the part that is here to stay with us. And obviously, I think corporates in terms of CEE venture capital market are still underrepresented. And but I think it's not going to stay like that. I believe CEE is not immune to global trends, and we will see increased participation of CVCs in venturing market in the region. And obviously, CVC forms special category, separate category of the venture capital market. So there are clearly differences between regular VCs and corporate VCs, and I'm pretty sure that founders and entrepreneurs that are considering going out and fundraise, heard a lot of things and probably both good and bad about working with corporate VCs, and I think it will be honest to start from the bad ones. And there is a lot of negative perceptions about corporate VCs. So just to name the few, corporate VCs have a perception of being slow, bureaucratic, difficult in discussions, not really very transparent regarding their decision-making process. And probably as a result of those and many other perceptions, probably CVCs are not getting attention from the best entrepreneurs and founders in the region. So would love to hear your perspective on this topic. So do you think those concerns are valid, and how would you react to if a founder comes to you and says, look, I probably will go ahead with regular VCs because of those concerns? Jakub, what's your perspective on this topic?
Thank you, Marcin, for this question. And I'm quite new and fresh to this area, I'm also experiencing and answering these questions from the startups. So your point is fully valid, fully right, and I do agree that the major challenges on the side of CVCs is to deal with this difference of pace between the startups and the large corporations. Simultaneously, this decision-making process is also pretty long, complex, structured, and this is the role of people such as venture guys in the corporations to bridge this communication effectively between the startups and the business, the regular classic product managing directors, global product managers, all the decision makers, all the sponsors that are in the business that are sometimes very willing to do an investment, but it takes several meetings to set up, to discuss all the pros and cons. I don't know, sometimes there are some discussions about due diligences, such as observing the large M&A process. And this is all about right people at right place to make it fast, make it accelerated. And let's know these startup agile guys that we are able to move fast, we are able to execute at speed and move things forward. So entirely agree that this is a huge challenge, and it is a thing that needs to be improved, and I believe it is continuously improving. Having this knowledge more and more common in the corporations that are learning from already made engagements with startups. So I believe that the more engagements with startups corporations perform, the more they learn about how to do business with them.
Thank you, Jakub. Joey, so Deutsche Telekom is a massive company that very honestly doesn't have a perception of being super fast and super non-bureaucratic. So how are you managing kind of the process in a way that doesn't make the founders unhappy?
So thanks, Marcin. First, I would want to flip this around back on you and the other regular venture capital investors who I don't think it's a real picnic for entrepreneurs dealing with the venture side either. Multiple meetings, always the venture guys will wait and put off the decision as long as possible unless there's somebody else that's going to push them out of the deal. There's usually no interest in moving forward. And so I think this comes with the territory. We're all a bit, it's not that we're slow, but you go into something which is by nature very risky. You try and mitigate as much as possible the risk. On the process side, I think we're actually, Deutsche Telekom, I think we're actually okay. We have an investment committee. We have a decent machine. We have regular deal flow meetings. We have regular approval checkpoints. We have a 2-gate process. Once we decide to do a deal, we close pretty quickly. The lawyers they know what to do. Where things do take much longer for us is for us to do a strategic investment, there has to be a strategic objective. And a lot of times we as the people trying to bring these deals in and create this picture, we are really ambitious. And we want to do something that's going to impact the company, Deutsche Telekom, impact the startup in a way that's mutually beneficial. And building these stories can take a long time. And here is where you do get into the slowness of Deutsche Telekom, and there may be a product decision and it gets delayed by a quarter or another quarter. And at some point, sometimes we just try to bring the deal forward. So, for a good strategic investment to happen, a lot of stars have to line up in addition to the ones that have to line up for a regular venture investment.
Very good points. Thank you, Joey. Christoph, how are you convincing the founders that you're the right choice?
Well, we are in a favorable position that when we have set it up, Lead Ventures, we invested a lot of thought and planning into this problem, and we come up with a solution that Lead Ventures legally or actually is not a CVC, but a regular VC with a strategic relation to a large corporation, let's say so. And the reason we decided to follow this recipe is that we realized the very same point you just highlighted, that CVCs has many advantages and many disadvantages, and try to scratch a structure or a solution where we can combine most of the advantages, but kind of get rid of the disadvantages. And I believe that, to be fair, we shall emphasize the positive side of CVCs or corporations, ability to test the project and the products, access to resources that are not available on the market, and so on and so forth, or just to have a deep understanding of the product or the technology per se. But I do admit that regular CVCs has many let's say drawbacks as well, even beyond the bureaucratic processes.
So thank you, Christoph. So 2 points I would like to follow up on is, number one, I think, Joey, you raised a very good point. So corporates are not investing for the money. And probably not a single successful exit from a successful startup is going to really move the needle for a large corporation. So I think it would be really good to highlight why your corporations decided to become active venture investors. What are the strategic reasons? And I believe it's super important, because like the strategic interest from the corporation may translate into fantastic value add for the founder and for the CVC-backed company. So I think, it would be really great if each of you could comment briefly on why your specific CVCs decided to become venture investors, and what kind of benefits or value add for your portfolio companies can it translate into? So maybe this time I will ask Christoph to start.
Well, it's a very important topic, and I believe this is not a good or bad answer type of situation. I believe what is very much important is for the founders to on the first hand understand, and afterwards make a wise decision that CVCs are not necessarily profit oriented, but rather strategic, or at least partially strategy driven, and funders need to make a decision at that point if they are comfortable with that or not. I mean, I believe there is no good or bad answers. And the other major topic connected to here is that CVCs usually don't have the regular fund structures as regular VCs, but rather a budget type of financing structures, and that could have an impact on the future financing of the ventures itself. So I believe if the founders do understand the framework and the environment CVCs can provide, then they can make the wise decisions if it is fitting for them or not.
So Christoph, to summarize, which kind of specific verticals or sectors of the technology market are strategic to you?
Yes, it's obviously energy and sustainability is a sweet spot for us. However, we do see that at least in Central Eastern Europe there aren't many scale-ups in this field, but we do have a great appetite for e-commerce related ventures as well, and in general the B2B software area is where we most usually invest.
And just to complement, so you require the strategic link between your portfolio companies and your corporate backer, or you can pretty much invest into anything?
We can invest into anything. Or major driver is the profit orientation. However, obviously we do favor if we find a fitting venture to us, what we can in one way or another incorporate into our major investor.
Mm-hmm. So Christoph, it's I would say that it's very good we have you in the panel, because your approach is unique. I think most corporates require kind of pretty well-defined strategic at least relevance or connection of what the company is doing to the strategy. But I think your strategy shows that there is no single approach among CVCs, and and there are many different flavors, which probably is another reason for any founder to do their homework and understand who they want to talk to, who can really be interested in their company and why. Joey, so how does it look in Deutsche Telekom?
So it's always I would say a bit of a risk from the perspective of the entrepreneur and for us. We're looking for companies that can make a difference in something that we're trying to do. If you think about DT, if you boil DT down to its essence, we're a communications company that sells fixed and mobile contracts to private and business customers. That's what we do. To do that, we have immense infrastructure costs. Fiber, towers, antennas, everything. Now, it's completely clear that our existing business model will, let's say, in the next 10 years, not carry us forward to new pools of revenue and businesses. Now, that's not to say that communications is becoming less relevant. Communications is becoming more and more relevant in every type of application or usage or new development, but we're not getting a piece of it. And so this is not going to come from within the company, how we get into these new business models and how we do these innovations. So for us, it's really almost like, I view it as kind of a lifeblood to connect with the startup environment, with entrepreneurs, with companies that can give us a lead into how we can play a role as communications develops in different segments. And I mean, the easy ones to look at are something like IoT. So, communications is in everything, in every device. There's not going to be a contract for each one of those devices, obviously. There might not even be a contract with the company that installs those devices. It may be that the communications contract needs to be with the OEM for the device. It may be that the communications contract is actually now with the silicon vendor that's actually integrating an LTE modem into that silicon. And so, and we're trying to get into all these areas, and oftentimes it's just going to be the startups that are smarter, they've seen it, they're more agile, they can get a foot in the door. And then if you look at this together, where we bring this major infrastructure backbone, and when we bring the customers and we bring the market presence, but we need somebody to bring us in, it can really be mutually beneficial. And I think that's the goal of corporate strategic investing. It's got to make sense for the startup as well. And so, there's a certain amount of pain, and we're slow, but we can be an on-ramp, and they can, for us, be a guide to our future.
I would say, Joey, that to what you said is super important, because I think the reality is that probably 80% of R&D budgets are being spent in corporate environments, but 80% of innovations are actually taking place in startup environment. And I think it's probably super important for corporations to be connected to what's really happening and all the innovations that are coming out from the startup ecosystem. And it is also one of the important roles of many corporate VCs. So definitely worth highlighting. Jakub, so how does it look in ABB's case?
Yes, thanks a lot, Joy. I really appreciate that you mentioned these bidirectional knowledge flow, this educational purpose of investments. I think this is really important, not to be just a parent to a startup, but also a learner from them. And I also believe that this bidirectional communication is hugely important. And of course, we as heavily experienced engineering company, we can provide a lot of expert domain knowledge to startups. And this is one of these advantages that startups could gain through collaboration with us. We also would like to maintain them as autonomous as possible. We would not like to acquire startup, right? It's an investment. It's a collaboration. It's a let's say providing the ecosystem to grow, to scale, to know what to do next. Certainly, we can provide access to markets from customers' perspective, knowing the brands who invested in the startup. We have R&D worldwide expert knowledge that could also help startup understand perhaps the market they work on, but simultaneously we are super happy if a startup could give us a steer where what is the market direction that we probably do not even know about. We are also in the transformation phase from a purely product-based approach to also digital space. We are noticing that this is the most developing and most fast-growing area of business. Certainly, we do address specific verticals regular business verticals with stronger focus on those that are fast growing, such as data centers, for example. And here we could offer both the domain knowledge to startups and also to absorb this fresh blood, this fresh market view from them and technology view that could open up, unlock untapped market segments for us. So that's definitely a thing we are aiming at. And we do believe in the smart money coming from CVCs. It might sound a bit cliche, but we do believe that we can provide the whole ecosystem for them to grow. We can let them make mistakes because of this strategic approach, not purely financial one. We can also let them know how to pivot and when to pivot if needed, if necessary, not abandoning them if they underperform financially.
Thank you, Jakub. So one follow-up question I would ask here is that strategic relevance or strategic interest may have its perceived dark side. So many founders may think that that corporation is really an exit route rather than an investor for the company. So the concern is that that why should I work with corporation relatively early in my journey if it's going to be potentially it's going to end up with potentially premature exit for me. So how often do you acquire companies you invest into, and how do you make sure founders and other investors feel comfortable about having you in the cap table?
It's not typically the case for us to acquire startups. We are more on the investor side. We are more on keeping them autonomous. We are more on the side to keep them protected on the IP side, etc., etc. So this is not our intention to acquire in most cases. We have also invested already, like in our active portfolio, we have invested $70 million over 9-10 years since ABB Technology Ventures started its existence. Overall, the investments are around 200 million. So we invest some money. We have also ambition to invest more. Now our target is to spend around $20 million per year in the ticket sizes above 1 million to 4, 5, 6, depending on the startups. And as I mentioned before, we also collaborate with. We have Synerlip ecosystem that is widely and well perceived for providing this good environment for startups to grow, to learn more. We also maybe I could advertise a bit now. We are just about to run a new startup challenge where startups could see who we are, what we do, and have opportunity to collaborate with us. The startup challenge, please, all the startups that are here present, you can log into collaborateandcommercialize.com, where you will see there are some specific topic areas provided by our divisions that are looking for some solutions, some ideas. So please do apply. Please help us and just prove yourself that you can collaborate with us, and you will see if it's a good fit for you or not.
So Jakub, you do not perceive your investment as a limiting factor,
not at all,
as far as exit of the company is concerned. You're happy to kind of to support the company through their journey and exit together, and you haven't acquired any of your investments yet.
I can assure you we haven't acquired a single one. I need to double check this, but overall our strategy is not to acquire startups. It's to let them grow.
Okay, thank you,
as
Joey.
autonomous as possible.
So how do you address the kind of those concerns?
Yeah. So To me, it's a really interesting topic because I've had the opportunity in my career to be on both sides of this. So, when I was at Intel Capital, we had this also a similar policy that we don't invest to acquire. But later on, I was in the business unit, and that changed, and there was a need to get into some new areas and acquire companies, and very naturally, some of these came from within the portfolio companies. So I don't perceive this as a negative at all. I look at it right now, my own situation in Deutsche Telekom, and I say, unfortunately, we aren't acquiring companies in the portfolio. I would like to see that change because I think what I learned when it comes to acquisitions is having a long-term strategic relationship, having teams in both companies working with one another, forming personal relationships, delivering a product together, going to customers together. This can be a great precursor to a successful acquisition. Acquisitions, as probably you're all familiar with, statistically have a very high rate of failure. And I think having this long-term relationship and success can be a significantly mitigating factor when it comes to the success of an acquisition. Whenever it comes, I don't think it's a risk or a limiting factor for the company. I think having a strategic investor that is a potential acquirer needs to perhaps be balanced. It needs to be managed correctly. But in essence, it's an opportunity for the company, because if all the things come together and DT is the right acquirer and this is the right company for us, then this is a success story. And, nobody is forced to sell. It's really, it's got to be the right price, the right story. When you talk to entrepreneurs in an acquisition scenario, most of the good ones are saying, not how much money do I get, but what will be my resources and how will I be able to ensure that I get to continue to develop this product and that this synergetic scenario really comes into reality. That's what they want to know. And so that's that can also be a future for a company.
Christoph, what's your perspective?
Well, yeah, we are rather startup oriented in this perspective. So one of the key pillar of our strategy is to support the ventures to be able to exit overseas or the Western European market rather than in Central Eastern Europe, as those markets, both in terms of sales and in terms of capital market, are usually much more lucrative from many perspectives. As such, to exit towards one of our major investor is not necessarily embedded in our DNA, but it's definitely an option. But we are not aiming for that kind of strategy.
So I would say that Joey, I agree with you that generally, acquiring the company that the corporation was a venture investor before can be a good thing. So I guess it might be a natural next step in the journey of the company. It might actually be welcomed by the founders, by other investors. But I think it would be super important. It is super important to make sure that that corporates are not a limiting factor. So if the company chooses to get acquired by one of its own investors, that's fantastic, and there's absolutely nothing wrong about it. But there are some concerns that basically, and please kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes if someone sees that Deutsche Telekom is a major investor in the company, it may cause problems for the company when they want to do business with Verizon, Orange, Vodafone, etc. I think the same may apply to ABB and to MOL. So basically, this is one concern related to, how do you make sure that your presence in the cap table does not limit, number one, business growth opportunities for the company. Number two, and there is also this perception in the market, maybe it's not as strong as the previous one, but there is this perception that presence of corporate in the cap table that may be potential buyer for the company may actually scare away other potential buyers. So are those valid concerns in your perspective? Did you hear that? And how do you address it in real life in your investments? So Jakub, maybe you can start.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't. Thanks, Martin. I do not think that being present on a cap table as a corporation is a very limiting factor for a startup to grow or to find a relevant investor in future or an acquirer. In some cases, it is good to find good co-investors if you have intention to really inject money to company and let it grow. So I believe that that right co-investment capital is the right thing to do here, but also a good communication with startup, with what they want to do, what they want to achieve, what is their vision, their strategy, their exit strategy, and their goals if they want to scale, if they want to grow, if they're not thinking of being acquired at the moment. As I mentioned, they could rely on us on mostly this domain knowledge we have in this growth moment, in this growth phase. So I do not think of corporations as a limiting factor at the cap table, but do not have a clear answer to your question on how to mitigate such concerns from the market.
So okay. So out of curiosity, how Jakub, what stakes do you take in when you invest?
It depends. It depends on the startup, on the particular deal. But it could be 10%, could be 20%, could be less. So it really depends. We also, one of our good success story, we have invested in 2017 in Northvolt, and it was like a really club investment. There are so many companies investing there, such as Volkswagen, but us ourselves. And back then we invested a ticket around 10 million euros. And now in 2020, Northvolt is a unicorn of valuation above $2 billion. But we were not the only ones who invested. We were not the only ones. We were not the limiting factor. Actually, the good thing we could provide it was that we had our research center. Their R&D lab was next door to our investors in Sweden. We also provided a lot of manufacturing expert knowledge. FYI, Northvolt is a battery manufacturer, green battery company. So they could find a lot of synergies from us in the production phase, in the manufacturing phase, product development phase. The other partners provided their expert knowledge in completely different domains, such as automotive, EV, from the automotive perspective, not from the charging perspective. And everyone brings something to the table. Let them absorb this knowledge. Let them also upstream their fresh blood. So I think that everybody benefited a lot. Company grew hugely, and everyone at the cap table really made both good money, but also good deal.
Okay, I asked about the stakes you're taking because obviously certain concerns have different weight depending on whether you have 5% stake versus you
95.
have a 20% stake in the company.
Sure.
But it seems, and I think it's really great from perspective of your portfolio that it wasn't a major concern or a problem if any of your portfolio companies so far. Joey, so did
just answer to follow up. Our average ownership, to more clearly answer the question, is below 10%.
Okay, so which obviously helps to diffuse potential concerns.
Yes.
If you're a single-digit investor. Joey, was it a concern for you? And I think maybe let me even before you answer, let me add one more element to the question. Did you ever co-invest with Deutsche Telekom's competitors? Because this would be kind of an ultimate test whether kind of strategic link is a limiting factor for your portfolio companies.
Yeah, no, really good way you positioned it. In terms first of shareholdings, so we're not typically going to be a major shareholder. We have a few exceptions, but for the most part, we're going to be 15% or well under. And really, the place where we try to get the most influence with the portfolio company is not necessarily via the investment, which is going to be 3 to 5 million, but really with the strategic engagement and going to market and going to customers, and that huge benefit that a startup can get from having to work with a big company and meet all of these different, call them bureaucratic, but a lot of times this is what the world will require that startup to do. And we're, with a portfolio company, we're going to be a bit more patient, and they're going to have the time, and it's not like they're going to lose the deal. So that can be a learning experience for them. In terms of co-investment, so we've actually done some significant co-investments recently with other European telcos. With Orange, we've invested in a company called Weaveworks. So this is a Kubernetes infrastructure company that Google is also invested in, and we were instrumental in getting Orange on board. We invested in a very innovative Israeli company called Clear, which is doing blockchain-based roaming and settlement for telcos. And we formed a consortium of 3. They were worried about exactly the topic you raised, Martin. They said, well, listen, if Deutsche Telekom comes in, we're trying to create a network for telcos, and we would be perceived as too much in the Deutsche Telekom camp, and this would get us in trouble with the other GSMA members. And we came back and said to them, well, but how about if we come in as a couple telcos, and each of us will take a small stake, and then really it'll be diluted. You'll get the benefit of having telcos who you need to work with and learn from for your system to work, but no one of us will be too powerful in terms of the cap table. And so we came in with 8 Roads was the financial investor, a very strong UK-based financial VC, but we then invested with Telefonica and Singtel. So it's Deutsche Telefonica, Singtel, and Telefonica. I think things are changing for us now, and we would not even hesitate to co-invest with Vodafone, who's probably our toughest competitor in various regions, even in Germany. And the thinking is that what's really a challenge for telcos today is not necessarily going to be other telcos, but more the threat and pace of the hyperscalers. So with telcos, it's kind of a zero-sum game, right? We can take their customer, they can take ours, but that's not what we all need to be doing. We all need to be figuring out a way to generate new business. And I think there it makes sense for us to work together, to invest together. I don't think that in an acquisition scenario, I think we have to be really good corporate citizens, right? If we mess things up with one startup company and this gets out in the market, we're finished. So if we want to acquire, we have to offer fair price. We have to make sure that it's open to other acquirers, not because we're charitable, but because it's in our interest as well to make sure that we get into the next investment in the next area.
Very good point, Joey. I think let me repeat it. So it rephrase and repeat it so it sinks in. When you deal with corporations, you need to, founders and startups need to remember that probably for every corporation, its brand and its reputation are the most important assets. And no corporate or corporate VC will do anything that can harm its brand and its reputation, because no single deal is worth it.
Yeah.
So I think that actually, if we take a look at corporates, those are actually investors that behave in incredibly ethical way. And of course, I think VCs of course also take care about their reputation, but I think this is really the argument that diffuses most of the worries about kind of what corporate VC can do that hurts me in the cap table. So I think, Joey, this is like super important point that I really wanted to repeat and underline. So Christoph, your turn.
You are on mute.
The very usual sentence of 2021. Yeah, thanks. We are in co-investors of many CVCs or corporates, and as we see, this problem what we are going around is a harsh one in two cases or two types of situations. For instance, we just refused to invest in a highly promising ventures a couple of months ago because that one was controlled more than 50% by two large corporations, and that was already a situation what was even compared to appetite was a bit too harsh. And the other situation when a CVC in the cap table can be constrained is where the target market is very concentrated, telcos, car industry, and so on and so forth. And as we see, this risk cannot be completely mitigated. However, there are certain homeworks what can be and shall be done. Board materials can be sanitized for CVC investors. Highly transparent corporate governance can be implemented, stating what can and what cannot done by CVCs, and so on and so forth. These are not magic tricks. These are quiet market standards, regulations, and all the ventures and even the investors shall pay attention to implement these to kind of address this problem, I believe.
Thank you, Christoph. So gentlemen, let me ask you a difficult question now, and I promise it will be the last difficult one during this panel. So one of the concerns is also that corporations tend to change their strategy from time to time. And it's natural, we all function in a very dynamic market. So sometimes what was strategic at the time of making the investment becomes completely non-strategic. The business unit may even be sold by the corporation, and a startup still has corporation as an investor. So how do you deal with the problem of, let's say, orphan portfolio companies that truly no one in the corporation cares about anymore? And Joey, I can see you're eager to answer this one.
Sure, I'll have a go at it. And Marcin, really, this is my nightmare. This is truly the thing that I lose sleep and sometimes will wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to get back to sleep about, because you go into these investments and you really almost have to sometimes suspend belief, because you know how screwed up sometimes things are in a company, or the startup, or the founder wasn't quite who you think, and you've got to at some point kind of almost put some blinders on and just say, I'm going to look at the half full part of the glass. But it happens, and then it's really a tough situation, because and it's almost by design. Because if you're using strategic investments as a way to get into new businesses, by definition, these are going to be the areas within the corporation that are the least structured, struggling for budget, they haven't really proven themselves. And you don't want this to be like trying to tie two rocks together to make a raft, right? And you really want to have your eyes open to the possibility, and you also want to not lose optimism that good things can happen and the stars can line up. I think the best, and we've all had this happen to us, right? Where you do the investment and everything was great, and a year later there's a decision, we're getting out of the business. We're shutting down that product, we're getting out of that geography. New GM comes in, says, no, I don't, I want to do new things now. It can all happen, and it all does happen. And I think the best thing you can do, first of all, is to be honest and really communicate, and not wait until the last minute. So make it clear, really fight for it. So if you think as an investment manager that this is the wrong direction, use the influence you have within the company to try and challenge the decision. And if at the end of the day, this is what happens, just not stand in the way of the company. Oftentimes, if it's possible, you would even sell the holding, whether it be to the company or to other investors, or as part of a package, or stay on as an investor if that's what works best for everybody. But just not be in the way of the company's success.
Thank you, Joey. Christoph, so how do you address those situations?
It's a very important question, and maybe go a bit before in terms of time. But it's highly important for every founder is if there is a successful CVC or CVC-like investor happened, they shall not to take granted the relation with the corporate for forever. So they shall work for it every day and gain their trust every day, day by day. If the situation happens that either the venture doesn't grow up to the expectation, or the corporate approach changes, so it can be any, then I cannot agree more with Joey regarding the approach an investor shall present towards the company. It should clearly communicate as soon as possible, not to waste any time of the venture, because I believe time is the most precious resource on each and every venture after all. So it's very much important where to invest it.
Thank you, Christoph. Jakub?
Yeah, I fully agree with you, colleagues. So not much to add on the extinguishing of the fire that has already that is already burning. So here again, like clear communication and mutual trust are the key aspects, key values. And the thing is rather how to mitigate those risks. Certainly, we need to think why or what might have been the reason for a company, for a corporate to either carve out or to abandon or to shut down or to I know whatever else do with particular business, with particular division, and where do they want to transform into what and through what. And quite honestly, I think that nowadays, if the large corporations need to make some turnarounds, then it might be even more of opportunity for startups to pivot either together with them or to find different gaps, different market opportunities that are more profitable, more high growth. And typically, I think that regular business abandon those that are not so smart, not so digital, not so, let's say, startup intensive in terms of collaborations with those companies.
We have a couple of minutes. Thank you, Jakub. We have a couple of minutes left, so I would like to finish our discussion with the following question to you. Because, like, you know, we've been talking for an hour about what is making corporate VCs special, you know, and we hopefully we dissolved some of the perceptions. But I think the conclusion is that, you know, corporate VCs can be super valuable investors, but they are different in certain ways than regular VCs, and also there are some elements that founders need to take into account, like, for example, you know, the change of strategy of the company. But, you know, my experience, and I'm really curious about your opinion about this topic. My experience is that the best combination is actually co-investment between solid regular VC and solid corporate VC, and generally, kind of, you know, the different perspective that corporate VCs bring to the table can actually, in combination with investment from solid VC, can maximize and can really help to maximize the value of the company in mid to long term. Would you agree with that statement, Jakub?
Yes, I think so. I think that in general, the different perspective, the variety brings here the value. So whoever the investment is between the regular VC and the CVC, or a couple of CVCs, but addressing different verticals from different angles. It's rather to the benefit of everyone to have this diversity here. So yeah, in general, fully agree with you, and it doesn't have to be just one regular VC and one CVC. The more, sometimes, the better. I mean, to some extent, of course. But if a company, if a startup addresses completely new thing that's being challenged from different angles by different people, by different companies with different priorities, it could be only to the advantage of everyone.
Joey?
Yeah, I think we all have a role to play. So we definitely like to have strong financial investors involved in the fact that they're driving towards an exit and developing the company's revenue, and it's important. We oftentimes, depending on the type of investment, can be more savvy when it comes to the technology challenges and the actual product challenges of a company, especially if it's a bit closer to our domain. And here we can bring a lot of value that a financial VC would never be able to bring. So if we work together and pull it off, and everybody understands their roles, it can be highly beneficial.
Thank you, Christoph.
We're running out of time to make it sure. Yeah, I cannot agree more with you. It makes the process a bit more complex, but I do believe that it's worth the investment. Absolutely. Super.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking part in the panel, and thank you very much for a fantastic and honest and open discussion. Really appreciate your approach. It was great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks.